Well, here we are, boys.
Silly boy.
Misfits Social. We are back and living large. How's everybody doing today?
Large.
This is Royce Wilson
Royce Wilson.
with Misfits Social.
Misfit.
And we got Cliff Nance,
What's your moderator nickname?
Brother Farnsworth.
I knew you were going there.
Brother Farnsworth. He's going to be talking to Cliff Nance today. Praise. It's been a long time, since 1972, have I talked to a young man with such promise. How you doing today, Paul?
Doing
We're
good,
here
man.
in the studio in Dallas, Texas.
Wall to wall, Holy Ghost.
Wall to wall.
Yeah, it's a good day. What's your joy level?
From the windows to the wall. Can you sing the next line, Paul?
I cannot.
All these females crawl.
Oh, good Lord.
Silly
That's
boys.
my joy level. It's high, buddy. It's high.
I see that. Paul, what's your joy level like today? Okay, moving on. And
He's like, read on.
so we're in it, man.
I'm in a static state. I just kind of constant joy.
Notice Paul waited till we moved on, and he's like, "Now I can interrupt.
Yeah, exactly.
now I can answer after everybody had waited as long as they could to move on." He's like, "Perfect. Now
I'm a slow thinker.
I have an idea. Now that it's moved on, I can interrupt."
I think he's still offended about the Walker conversation in the car earlier.
Yeah,
Walker is in, not Walker, Texas Ranger.
Texas Ranger.
Him walking on his walker.
Oh yeah. We turned that corner and something in the back went. He just scratched across the back of the Suburban, and he was like, "What is that?" And I said, "I think it's Paul's walker." I'm glad we put those tennis balls on it.
Geriatric.
That was on point.
So, man, we are in it. We have been recording episodes. We've had several released, but we haven't really talked about you, Cliff.
Yeah.
This is
No, we have talked about you, but just not on the podcast.
okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Back
the
on.
interrupter has spoken,
He-
and we
he
have
has.
talked about
He
you.
has.
I don't think we've really dug into this. Is your brainchild. This is your passion project. It's closely associated with Tunco. It's closely associated with you. This is your passion project. It's quite courageous what you're doing too, because, well, as long as I've known you, we've both been really passionate about mission, what we would call mission, and maybe not everyone gets what that is, but we want to get into that.
Yeah.
Why Misfits Social? You know.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about you and your passion for why you want to bring your voice and bring Paul and I along
Yeah.
with his walker into this space.
Well, bringing you and Paul along happened the night we were all drunk around the fire pit, and,
Silly
and
boys.
Paul was walking his walker
He was
naked
pushing
around
his
the fire
walker
pit,
around.
and
Yeah.
he's like, "Let's start a podcast."
Yeah, he had on a hospital gown,
Yeah,
but the back wasn't
with the
tied.
back open. Yeah.
The back wasn't tied.
Silly
No,
boys.
so to answer the podcast answer is probably the shortest in terms of this isn't something I ever thought I'd find myself doing. A friend of mine, Jennifer Betts, we were working together. We contracted a company that she was the CEO of for a while called Recycled Media, and they were helping Tunco with our digital advertising, and podcasts were a big platform that they would use to help get your SEOs up and different advertising levels through whether it's LinkedIn, social, various social platforms. And she pitched the idea, and I was like, "No, you're crazy. I hate my voice. I don't want to be sitting in front of a microphone or a camera." And she just kind of stayed on me about it. And then my good buddy Adam Howe, best man in my wedding,
Whoop, whoop.
been friends for a long time, is a audio engineer genius, and is becoming a genius behind the camera and mixing and things. And I pitched the idea to him. I said, "Hey, if we're going to do it, I at least want it to be quality. I need some help." And so we worked on the concept for about 10 months. And as far as having you and Paul as my co-host, I don't want to talk for an hour. I don't think anybody wants to hear me talk for an hour. And I love all the conversations that we've had over the years. When we were pitching this idea together, we were like, there's probably some conversations that just for me, I would have loved to have recorded, not for anybody else, just so I could go back and push play and hear that conversation all over again.
Or maybe some people that you would have liked to have been in that conversation, right? It would have been helpful. It's kind of hard to retrieve those things.
Yeah, that's right.
And you think this could have been beneficial for to answer some questions for folks.
Yeah.
And just think of the amount of good conversations we've had over the years. It'd been pretty cool if they had been recorded, man.
Yeah. Yeah, and if you could go back and tag into those, and we get to do that, I guess, a little bit with our journaling and stuff like that, but that's fairly individualistic unless you're doing it, from a therapy session side, and I just feel like I feel like we do have something to say. I'm not sure everybody wants to hear it. It's probably not for everybody, but it'll find its way, where it needs to.
And it's not just our voices either, or our opinions. I mean, having guests on brings up a lot of interesting conversation, and just our natural curiosity, the curiosity of people who would listen. It's just cool to explore different parts of our society and the way people think.
Yeah. I think there was probably another part of that question I may have forgotten. We were just kind of talking about the pod and why the pod. Was there another?
Yeah, just your heart too, because maybe you could tell us a little bit, just your heart with Tunco, right? We had the privilege of having your dad on, told us the origin of Tunco, but the mission of that culture, and then how this is an extension of sorts. How is this an extension of the voice of the company that you lead as well?
Yeah. So I've since I was a teenager, I've always felt like I had a call on my life to something beyond myself. But I also knew that from my parents passing along to me gifts of business. My dad's a great businessman. My mother is like the most detailed in terms of keeping up with things, keeping an operation going. So I feel like I've got a lot of good from both of them. And so there was a time in my life when I thought I would actually do philanthropy work for most of my life. I mean, when I was a teenager, we probably didn't have what I would call money. I mean, we were okay, but we didn't really have money. And I was just the easiest path for philanthropy was to work in the church. And I felt called to do that, to help people. And then the way I met Paul was in the early 2000s. I was doing some traveling around, met Paul in Columbus, Ohio. That's similarly how we met, Royce. Mm-hmm. And just as I started to grow and mature, I realized that God had put gifts in me from a business perspective that didn't need to be wasted. Kind of like going back to the parable of the talents. I didn't feel like he wanted me to just go hide it and then show up with it in the end and say, look here, I've protected this thing. I felt like he wanted me to go multiply that. And so I spent probably my 20 to 30 year old life, trying to figure that out, like really trying to figure out, am I going to be a minister? Am I going to be, someone who works with the disenfranchised? Am I going to be a business owner? There was a lot of vacillation in me in that time of my life.
I'd like to dig into something. I want you to keep going, but I want to dig into this as we go.
Yeah.
Do you feel like, and again, I'm just speaking really broad, the church has made a mistake in that it's become such a bubble a lot of times, that it hasn't given credence or room for the ministry, I'm almost putting air quotes up here, that's done through business? What would you say to that? When you were growing up, did the church recognize how business is so integral to the mission, to the work, to bringing good into the world?
Short answer, no, I don't think they do that. But I also think the church has become institutionalized, much like education has become institutionalized, medical field has become institutionalized. And as that happens, you lose efficiency big time. And you become an echo chamber a little bit, have a lot of groupthink. And on top of that, you develop this inefficiency to really be able to see the forest for the trees. So we would say in our organization, we would say you're unconsciously incompetent, which is basically you're ignorant about it and you have no idea that you're ignorant about it. And that's not an insult. It's just there's so many generations that pass and you're just doing what is normative. So you don't think outside of whatever that is. So at that point in my life, I actually did get disenfranchised and really a little bit jaded because there was this separation of what Luther would have said, the sacred and the secular.
Yes.
And I feel like going all the way back to Martin Luther over 500 years ago, that was something he was really seeking to tear down. That there would no longer be this separation, but that everything is sacred. There is no not sacred. Even for me, if we use church terminology and say an unbeliever is not unsacred. They're a child of God, you know. So every person that we are talking to, everything that we're coming across, every person's gift is sacred.
Isn't that at the heart of good news too? Is telling someone who doesn't believe something yet what the reality really is.
Yeah.
Now they may or may not accept it, obviously, but the joy is from this kind of good news is that hey, you're 100%. Sacred.
And the first time, Royce, that came like super alive to me was all three of us. We were going through some spiritual transformation at around this 2008 to 2011, 12-ish time. It was major curves for all of us. And I went to a group out in Seattle called Soma. Actually, they were in Tacoma.
Yes.
And the teaching elders at that time were Caesar Kalinowski and Jeff Vanderstelt. And I went to a training event. The first night, it was in their bar. Now, keep in mind, I'm from the Bible Belt, and bar and Jesus don't really go together.
They don't go together.
Now, it's in the New Testament, but it's not in the Bible Belt. So that was a first shocker for me, right? And so they're in there that night, and we start what's called the story of God. Some people might be familiar with that. And Caesar ends up, like when they land the plane and they're not really doing instruction anymore, and he's talking about honoring people's gifts. Like Caesar can tell a story. He's one of the best storytellers I've ever heard. And he gave a story of how at Shaka Bra they would do open mic night, but they would do, some nights they would do music, and then other nights they would do like poetry.
And that's the name of the bar, correct?
Yeah, Shaka Bra is the name of the bar. And so they had believers and non-believers come in doing these poetry nights. Well, Caesar would do the story as part of his poetry, but he had another lady that would come in, and she was staunch atheist, but just an incredible writer, And after she finished her night, Caesar went up to the mic and just was like really giving her words of affirmation. He wasn't bullshitting her. She had an unbelievable gift. And he was giving her accolades about the gifts that God had put in her. Well, she comes up at the end of the event that night, and she's kind of like misty-eyed, like, why would you say that? She wasn't offended. It just took her aback, and he was honoring what he felt like God had put in her, whether that was necessarily her truth or not.
Right.
But she recognized that. And for me, that's the good news. He wasn't, it was a compliment to her, even though that wasn't necessarily her position or where she felt it coming from. She still felt it as a huge compliment. And him telling that story, like, changed my perspective of how I see everyone. That I was already getting the concept of the sacred and secular, or us and them, or Jesus would say, well, who is your neighbor, type thing. Those walls are already really coming down, but that just took a wrecking ball to it and was like, oh my God, I have had this so freaking wrong,
That's fantastic. So with Tunco, the kingdom, this concept of the kingdom, and you're a profitable business, a business that salvages? Your purpose is to be profitable.
Most
years. Yeah, it depends on the year.
How does I just kind of ask it this way, right? How does the kingdom intersect with the work and reality of Tunco as a business? Because that could be surprising to some people.
Yeah. I'm gonna actually flip this. I'm gonna ask Paul a question.
Do it
before I answer that. So, Paul, you came to our executive meeting there in Lubbock, Texas, where we were doing the Kingdom at Work, and you spoke to my executive committee and actually helped us write a purpose statement. So I just want to hear from you. How did you see the Kingdom at Work in that executive committee during that time? Because we have people who are believers and non. We actually have some who are actually atheists.
Right.
How did you see that at work?
Well, I mean, I've heard the phrase recently, work as church, and I think that, we have, again, the sacred and secular divide has been problematic. But I think that business owners are like pastors. I mean, just take this out of the church setting, because really the church setting was not something that Jesus invented. It's a Western construct, the way we do church. He presented a way, and I see in the business, and I see at Tunco, a way, right? Because what you do has a trickle-down effect for everybody involved with you, right? You're shepherding. It's like a father. It's like you're giving care. You're creating life and thriving for a community. So if the business thrives and things go well, people's lives can be blessed. They're in intimate interaction day after day. It's a great setup for the kingdom to work. But it may not look like church. It's a messy, if you think about it as church. Mm-hmm. It's messy relationally and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So
is that what you mean?
Yeah. No, that's good. I think from how does that relate to our business specifically? I actually don't. There's certain words that I'm starting not to like. So in other words, if some of these words have so much emotional tagging with it, like when you say it, there's automatically a huge reference point that comes up, and then like it's just got this lineage of thought with it, and church is one of them. Mm-hmm. It's like the word abortion. Yeah. You can ask somebody we actually did this the other day at the office as a practice. We said pro-life, pro-choice. And we said, which one of these groups are for life?
Depends on your perspective, right?
Yeah, but pretty much everybody there said pro-life.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, what about the pro-choice? Like, are they not for life? And they're like, well, yeah, but. I was like, okay, well, let's back up before the but. What life are they for? They're for the life of the mother. So try to get them to see that through our emotional tagging with the etymology of words, that, I mean, there is such a thing as literature anthropology, and it is how we see literary anthropology. It's how we see the words and how that impacts us when we hear those words. Yeah. And so you won't hear me talk a lot about Christianity. You won't hear me talk about the church. You'll hear me quote scripture, but I won't even tell you that it's from the Bible.
Yeah.
It just sounds like something fancy that somebody smarter than me wrote. Right?
Ancient wisdom.
Yeah, like an ancient proverb. And sometimes I'll say that. Mm-hmm. That's an ancient proverb. And so I feel like because God has put the gifts and callings in all of us, that it is my responsibility not to snuff that out, mm-hmm. but it is to bring it to life, actually put gasoline on it, and help those people, all of our team members flourish. And some of that means that people don't stay with us. Like some people
don't like that culture of what?
No, actually,
sometimes it's their maturation.
Some people mature more than what I can give them. So I have had in the last 6 years, I have 3 people that have left that are now business owners.
Okay.
And they're all talented people that I'd love to have back. And I'm still friends with all of them. Had one leave, start her own marketing deal, bought an investment property. Another guy leave and buy a construction company. And now he's one of the largest construction companies in the county, if not the largest. And my director of finance just left and bought a CPA firm. I'm not saying that's because of me. What I'm saying is they've outgrown me.
Yeah.
And I
Flourishing.
Yeah, they're flourishing,
Yes.
and that's what we want. And the finance gentleman who just left, when I told him, I was like, dude, I'm excited for you. I could see him just like physically exhale, because we do develop like such a close knitness. It's hard for them to come and say, hey, I'm leaving.
But just because, let's just say you view your role as a calling and you're doing business and it causes thriving and flourishing among the people that are associated with you, and even spill over maybe to other businesses and associates and community and all of that. How would you then posture? I mean, do you expect that everybody feels the same way you do about church? Because so for you, church may have a little barb to it. And for somebody that you're trying to communicate good things to, church may have a little barb to it. You know what I mean? It's like it's a sticky word.
But we don't talk about it.
Right. So, but I'm just saying, how do you feel about people who don't have that and continue to go to church, and that's kind of where they find their flourishing?
Oh, I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Like actually,
it's not either or. In other words, you're saying it's
it's
Tunco
it's
serves
just
a
it's just
place.
it's just everything. We actually have I have a gentleman who's one of my plant manager. He's a plant manager, and he's an apostolic pastor, which is a lot of what we came out of that we're not anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not, he's not busy trying to convince me to come back,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not busy trying to convince him to come this way. Like, we love on each other, and he's where he's at, and I'm good with that, and I think he's good with where I'm at.
Yeah.
And I support him like to the fullest extent.
I mean, we took everybody with any kind of promise inside of our church culture, and we said, well, you got to be a preacher, because there's no plan B for anybody with promise. You know what I mean? You didn't give room for people to flourish outside of a church setting and see that as viable. I think that's what's changing.
Yeah, but I would also say there's a little bit of human element in that, to where if you're a strong leader and you're going to be coaching people up, you're going to coach them naturally to what you feel like the next level is, wherever that is at. And I think that just happened to be where we were at that point. So if you're an executive and you believe that executive is the highest level, and you've got somebody you really want to mentor, you're going to try to coach them up to the executive level. Now, I think that's a terrible prescription. And the reason why I think that is because everybody can't be an executive. Yeah. Everybody can't be a pastor.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody can't be a CPA.
No, it was a mistake.
You know what I'm saying? So like what we've learned painfully in our own organization, and then in the organization as in Tunco, but even then in our past, is that I feel like it's more important to find what's inside of a human being. What are their gifts and callings? And then light that on fire. Like, take that and put some gasoline on it.
Let them be the best them that God called them to be.
Yeah. So I'm in my 40s. You're in your 50s. You're in your
70s,
80s.
Man,
so 40s, 50s,
going up.
40s, 50s, and 60s. Right? We got 40s, 50s, and 60s, and we have experience and wisdom from running into walls that hurt, that we can take that experience and wisdom and help coach somebody that has gifts and callings that we feel like we're good at coaching at. And so when we talk about, really impacting for the kingdom at Tunco. That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
And you know, where does like technically ministry come in? It makes a place for itself. You know, you don't have
relational.
You don't have to go hunting for it.
No.
You just have to be willing to love people.
Exactly.
But it's the playground.
That's what you have to be willing to do first. And it's a lot harder than you think because,
Absolutely.
you know, it's easier to run a business with a firm grip and just care about the bottom line and be a drill sergeant. It's, you know, I don't think it's more successful, but it's easier.
Yeah.
This gets messy.
Yep. Well, and that's the struggle with, and I'll just jokingly call it a dumb dichotomy between secular and sacred. You have the church that's just kind of historically more and more become about a service on Sunday, as if all the world needs is just more services. And if
that's the end game.
Yeah, like the mission is if the whole world could just function like a good church service.
Yeah.
No one said that, but that's kind of the weird subliminal push with Tunco, right? This is a place which is, I love the example in that you have someone that you and I would not go to church with, or they wouldn't go to church with us because there's some differences there. And yet you can work together on the same team to bring about and actually, and that's why I called it a playground, actually put into action these things that do get talked about on Sunday. And it's like, this is where it can really happen.
And arguably the guy that's his plant manager does more ministry during the week than he certainly does on the weekend.
As far as contact wise, yeah.
And you're spending more time.
Shoulders, yeah.
You're going to spend more time with your Tunco coworkers than you likely will with your church members.
Yeah.
Because wherever your job is, then that's a big place of investment.
Yeah.
And I would say too, I've talked to you, but how important are employees to that vision and mission of what Tunco is all about? And that, and I want to just say this, I call it kingdom. It's archaic, but it's this idea of where we value the will of a king.
Yeah.
You know, it's like our higher authority, our highest value is like, hey, what do you say about the way work should be done?
Yeah.
How important are employees in that vision?
Well, so the first thing is I don't like that word.
All right.
Employees. I prefer stakeholder.
All right.
Our human capital is what we believe the most valuable asset in the company. You know, from our perspective, I have buildings. I have several $1 million of inventory, but that can all go away tomorrow, and I can go buy more inventory. I can go buy more buildings. I have several $1 million of human capital. If that goes away tomorrow, it's irreplaceable. Like, it's absolutely irreplaceable.
And so tell me why.
I don't really prefer the word employees. We refer to staff as stakeholders. The human capital aspect is so important because, as I mentioned, you might be able to get buildings and scrap and other things, but being able to go get super talented people that not only are talented, but they have years of tribal knowledge that, I mean, you cannot replace that. I mean, if you put me, Sizemore, my dad, Amy, a couple other people who have been there, I mean, you're talking about hundreds of years. I mean, I've got Bill Duncan is in logistics. He's been with me for almost 20 years now. I mean, think of the shit he's seen come in and out in 20 years. I mean, you're not really going to run anything by him that he hasn't seen before.
And that collective knowledge and even buy-in, you could go buy more. You can find tungsten somewhere and go buy it really easy, but you that's almost priceless. Like you can't.
You're damn right. It is priceless. I mean, Bill Duncan knows more about tungsten material than some of my customers.
Incredible.
Like, no doubt. As far as going and identifying material, talking about value and what the composition of it, I have customers that I would put him up against as far as knowledge.
Like the blink effect. He just knows it.
Yeah. I mean, and that's what we call unconsciously competent. He can do it in his sleep.
Incredible.
Yeah, he's not just aware of things. It's just like breathing for him.
And we're going to pivot, but I want to just ask another thing as a follow-up here. That's why just how business has such a powerful place in spiritual realities too, because we spend so much of our life there.
100%. Yeah.
And when you invest in people like what you're describing and allow them to flourish and thrive, we're helping people bring greater good into the world when we nurture that and we provide a place for it.
Yeah, and ultimately, I referred to Paul helping us write our purpose statement, and what we landed on was stewarding in the collective health of the planet and the people. When we were trying to work that out, we had people that would say, hey, our purpose is tungsten, or our purpose is making money. And the making money thing came up several times because we do a profit sharing. And finally I just said, okay, let me give you a scenario. If making money is the priority, we have a year where it looks like we're going to lose about $1 million. So instead of doing that, we're going to cut $1 million of staff to make sure we don't lose money, because money is our purpose.
How do you feel about that?
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it was crickets. Like, you know, and so I'm like, hey, obviously I'm the owner and the majority shareholder. So that's, if we're losing, that's impacting my pocketbook. But we choose not to look at 12 months. Owning a business, if you're really going to be a business, if you want to be, you know, a private equity person, or you want to be VC, or you want to turn something, flip something super fast, that's fine. I'm not against that, but that's not our model. Like, we're in this for the long run. My son has already said he wants to take over the company. And, you know, I'm trying to coach him now on, yeah, there'll be years where you can go do something really nice for yourself. But there's also going to be years where you may not take a salary for half the year. I've had that happen in the last decade. During COVID, I took no salary for 6 months. So it's just, you know, those are the kind of decisions that you have to be willing to make if you're going to have a kingdom-minded business that's not just like chasing whatever the next profit is. And I just feel like in the end, it pays off in the end.
I mean, seeing business as mission is a beautiful thing because it scales and it basically pays for itself. Think of everything else that we think of as mission is a big black hole for donors. I mean, it just really is. It's just hard to do something that we call ministry and it not require a lot of shekels from a lot of donors whose hearts bleed for that same thing. And it's not that that's bad. It's just that's the fact, right? When you could take the model of kingdom work and move it into business, and if we see things, it's just scalable. And
well, it pays its bills.
Right.
It's helping pay the bills of the people who are a part of it, helping their lives, you know. And then also it creates resources in so many ways. It's a brilliant place to be. Pivoting just a little bit, it's really let's zooming in just a little bit more. The three of us, we haven't put this out here yet, but the three of us were raised pretty dang conservative. And I'm probably going to be on this couch over here saying, I was raised the hardest. Me and Cliff are close neck and neck, but
you got me beat.
I think I got you just a little bit
that
for just
that gospel rock lie.
The lie about that gospel rock. That's what it is. But here's the whole thing, right? So the three of us have had a really unique journey, and Cliff, I'm aware of your journey. To summarize it, how do you go from holiness, Pentecostal holiness, conservatism, and owning a bar? Because one of the missional ventures that you're a part of is the Crowded House. And it's an incredible restaurant, but also an incredible bar. So to summarize it again, how do you go from Pentecostal holiness in Kentucky in the fires of revival? Brother Farnsworth just comes out.
Yeah, you can't help it.
As if it's 1972. One more time.
Be careful, you're going to make me get out of the seat.
It was Holy Ghost from wall to wall.
Have a Holy Ghost fit here in a minute.
Have a hold down, Brother Cliff. I just gave that boy a month of sermons right there on the couch. And so that's how we were raised. How do you go from that and you own a bar?
All right. Well, let's establish one thing first. As a teenager, I was a shithead. And that didn't have anything to do with the church that I attended.
Or were you limiting that to being a teenager? Because I was just...
Nah. Well, there's iterations.
Yeah.
I was gonna.
Some things never change.
I was a shithead in my teens, an asshole in my 20s. We'll save the 30s and 40s for later.
Yeah. We ain't got words for that yet.
Yeah. And that probably was more because I was an only child than anything. Had a great mom, but she definitely thought she had the baby Jesus. And I thought I was baby Jesus, but that didn't make
his little legs,
yeah.
his little hands.
But that didn't make me act like Jesus. That made me act like Lucifer sometimes.
Well, talk about that. That's good.
But yeah, no, I think probably the biggest turning point for me, I kind of mentioned that time frame where in that 2008 to 2012 window, there was a lot of things happening within the organization that we were a part of. And I was having a lot of things happen within me personally. I remember you recommending the book Unchristian, and there was another one that's got a red cover on it, and I cannot remember what it was called, but it was a Viola book.
Pagan Christianity. Question mark.
Pagan Christianity. That effed me up.
Rocked my world too.
And then somewhere around that time, my grandfather passed away. My grandfather was somewhat of a spiritual father for me. Coal miner, just a salt of the earth guy, lower middle class, never really had a lot, but was always really good with what he had, kept everything neat, took me fishing, took me hunting, Sunday school teacher. And as he got older in life, my Sunday afternoons were spent at his house watching NASCAR. Thank God I actually got to take him to a couple of races before he passed.
Cool.
So that was something, that I really treasure. But I remember standing at his casket and watching these grown men, coal miners, come in, like guys I knew all my life. And I had never seen these guys shed a tear over nothing, And when I say these guys were hanging on to my grandmother, like she was consoling them. Like, I mean, snot coming out, and I'm just befuddled. Like, not that my grandfather wasn't a good guy, right? But I was sitting there looking at him laying in that casket, and it was just like it came over me. What would it be like if me and him switch roles right now? And I think my family might have been crying because I would have died young, but those men were crying because of the impact that my grandfather had on them. And I mean, he didn't come back and tell me this, but just what I came up with on my own was, that shows the impact that just being steady, salt of the earth, unwavering, being an example, that's the kind of impact that can make. You don't have to do some grandiose deal. And at that time, every idea that I had that I wanted to do, whether it was church related, business related, was trying to put a man on the fucking moon. I mean, sorry, Paul, but I mean, that's how my brain worked. It had to go. And I even had a guy in my life that said, well, the way it's God is if it's big enough where it seems impossible. I mean, that's the dumbest shit I've ever heard. It doesn't have to be something monstrosity for it to be God. Like, right. That's asinine.
Right.
I'm like, I look back at that now and I'm like, where did you get that idea at? From Noah's Ark? Like, outside of that, I mean, so then going back to my shithead comment, is I would be one of those guys who would go to church on Sunday night and then go out to the restaurant at night. And if my food wasn't right, I'd be completely disrespectful to the wait staff, like, because they didn't get it right. And just so all this stuff is like a damn domino effect of how I saw myself. Like, it's just like, you're not who you think you are. Like, you're really not a good person. And so I just started seeking all that out. It had nothing to do with the church that I was a part of. Nothing. I'm not connecting those dots. It was
much deeper.
It was much bigger. Deeper, and it was my problem. It wasn't anybody else's problem. So I'm not trying to pass the buck there. But you asked how I ended up owning a bar.
Yeah.
Is as I went through all of these iterations of life, like, things started opening up to me. And we had lived in Columbus, actually working with Paul for a while, and came home. And at that point, I hadn't fully taken over the business. I was the director of operations. But the way I work, I had what I considered a lot of free time on my hands. Now, if some people who were close to me were sitting here, that would mean I'm not working 60 hours a week, because I'm a little bit of a grinder in terms of what I need in front of me, like, to keep the wheels greased. So Andrea's my wife. Haven't mentioned her. I got 2 kids, Evan and Claire. Evan's 19, Claire's 14. And at the time, we only had Evan, and we decided we'd start a restaurant as a marketplace ministry. I mentioned Shaka Bra earlier. That's kind of where it came from, was the guys out in Tacoma, Washington. And that's how it got started. That was in 2011. It's 2025 now. And they've done over $1 million in revenue the last couple years. And it's probably, I don't want to say what the rating is, but it's one of the more favored restaurants, I think, in Madisonville. And it's like a gastropub. We have over 70 bourbons at all times, somewhere between 20 beer probably 12 to 14 beers on tap, but probably 20 to 25 total. And try to elevate the food, as much as we can for our customer base and what everybody wants and what our capabilities are. But it's fun, and enjoy hanging out. And it's a great it's a community.
When you moved down there, I was involved in, when you bought the building and watched all that. I mean, it was pretty much boarded up downtown Madisonville. There wasn't a whole lot going on. Yeah. And I mean, I think in part, the bravery to move down into that area and to invest in the community became impetus for others to come along too. And when you go downtown Madisonville now, it's not like that. I mean, it's there's life down there.
Yeah, today we're probably sitting at about 90% capacity, full. And it was probably opposite of that in 2011.
Yes.
The only thing that was really open were some law offices. There was no real thriving business. Now, Farrell's, the burger joint, it's been there since like the 40s. I mean, it's a staple.
Your building,
I think they're about as recession proof as you can get. But
your building was practically condemned. I mean, it was like you had to gut the whole thing, and it was like just take it down to the bones.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, to your point, Paul, I think another thing that we need to, if you're really thinking about marketplace ministry, I think you have to think about the redemptive story.
You brought good news to that downtown.
Yeah.
And not just great steaks and seafood and burgers.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
And to the life of employees, to take it a little further, I mean, I've watched also the migration of the business into more of a kingdom kind of a deal. I saw it early on, and adding buildings and processes and getting better at what you do, and also the attitude toward employees. And you create a life for people.
Yeah.
Where would they be working? What would they have if it wasn't for that, right?
Yeah.
What viability would they have in that region? They might have to move out, who knows, right? But they have a place there, an opportunity to thrive. And that is the way.
Yeah. Yeah, so if somebody were to ask me, hey, what's one word that describes the story of God, I would say redemption. And if they ask me, what's one thing that we need to be working towards, it would be redeeming the things around us.
There you go.
Unpack redeeming.
Yeah.
What is redeeming? What is it?
So I'm not a hermeneutic guy, at least without a book in front of me. But for me, redemption, if I'm going to paint a picture, it's a picture of an old building, you know, that still has value. It's not a throwaway. It still has life, you know. It's got some cracks in it. Windows need to be replaced. Maybe there's some asbestos in there that needs to be abated.
Yep.
But it can still produce, and maybe produce more than it's ever produced before, if something breathes life back into it. And I feel like that's what Christ did for us whenever, not just by his death, but by sending the Spirit to the earth.
Yes.
That for me, that's the pinnacle for me as a believer. Because that was the redemptive work that brought true life back into all of us. If you want to do an interesting study about what that looks like, just study how much human flourishing changed after about 40 AD, and how it and what it did before that. And I mean, it's like
justice.
You know, it's like you put gasoline and dynamite on a fire. And so I think for me, the way that looks is redemption is really good news, but it's not me fixing anything. And I think that's where we can get in trouble is
So explain that. What do you mean?
So if humanity or a person needs repair, that's not my job to fix. It's my job to come alongside and kind of help hold them up. I see myself more like a nurse in that respect, but he's the great physician.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I can go in and I can help repair a building, but that building's not going to become a thriving business without him doing the work.
We're midwives.
That's what we are.
We're helping something be born, but we're not the source. We're not the power.
And so
I can't save anybody. I can't redeem anybody. But
and
I
so
can tell them
if we see it differently, if we see ourselves too high, then we are God.
Yes.
And we're disappointed when we don't get the results that we want.
Because we're working out of our own power.
And we can be disappointed with all kinds of things at that point. We can be pissed at God. You can be like, well, I'm in a small town and small town just doesn't get it. That's stupid. If you got a good product and it's right and blessed and everything, if you build it, they will come. That doesn't make sense either. You know, that works in a Hollywood movie. That doesn't work in business. And so I feel like the redemption story is us coming alongside him in that, but he's still the one doing the redeeming.
So, you know, there's been a lot. I mean, I roll the tape back to 2008 and to today. That's a lot of years of walking alongside of concepts and heart change and struggle. So now, what do you feel that challenge is for you personally? What's the next challenge that you feel on you? Like, if you were answering your call, right? If you continue to answer your call, what is God doing in you? What is that call doing in you? What do you think is next? How do you feel like you're being called next? Maybe it's this podcast, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I've thought about that from a podcast perspective. I mean, I'm not doing this just because the opportunity opened, you know. We got together and talked and felt like we do have some things we want to say. Whether somebody wants to listen or not, we'll see. It'll find its way throughout that. I think, Paul, the way I approach that today, because I've gotten myself in so much trouble in the past trying to help God out, the way I try to do that now is personal preparation. I just try to always be available and be learning. And I don't have that answer.
It's like it can be serendipitous. I love what our guest the other episode said, Jeff Lamb, about it often comes through a person.
Yeah.
when the Lord's nudging you a new way, or
Yeah. So I mean, for me, I'm kind of preparedness is what's important for me. I do feel a huge tug on my life for teaching. That's a big teaching and coaching is a big passion for me. So I think in whatever my next phase is, like when I'm less needed at the organizations that I'm in charge of running right now, this is kind of a pipe dream, but I would like to be a professor, and teach history or anthropology or theology, something like that. Spiritual formation. For Royce Wilson. Yeah. Yeah. So I've kicked too many doors down and got my ass kicked for doing that, and I don't have any interest in doing that.
Yeah, I got that certificate too.
Yeah, yeah, couple times.
Yeah, live in the now. Let God do the smart stuff. Like steward what is now. Let God do the smart stuff as far as like guiding us along.
Yeah, because the reality is he don't really need any help.
No.
I mean, he just doesn't. And I think sometimes we think about ourselves a little bit more highly than we should, thinking that he does.
Well, when we talk redemption, we get close to that work, and we kind of get confused as to who's doing what.
Yeah.
We're just telling people, we're just putting the word out there that they have been bought back. I didn't buy them. I can't afford them.
Yeah.
But I get to herald some amazing news that they're free.
Yeah.
They're free in a way they may not even realize it.
Yeah.
That they're more valuable than they even realize they are. They're going to do things and have more importance than they may have ever realized they have. They were bought back, and then the life of that buyback is available to empower them to keep living once they realize it and they accept that reality. That's redemption,
I think the other thing, which I know we're kind of getting close on time, and don't want to open a can of worms here, but I think
you're dismissed.
I think say dismissal.
You're
prayer.
dismissed, brother.
I think the other thing that probably was a game changer for me was getting off of the motivation of win-lose metrics, heaven, hell, that I'm in this race to try to save everybody I can save, because I shifted my theology to believing that God is the one doing the saving. And you can say free will, not free will. We're not going to debate that. We don't have enough time on this pod to debate that. But what I believe is Tim Keller gives the example of salvation is like walking through a door. And on this side of the door, above it, it says, "Come to me, whosoever will." And when you walk through the door and you turn around and look over the door, it says, "You haven't chosen me, but I've chosen you." So it's a little bit of a conundrum there.
It's a paradox, a beautiful paradox.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think anytime you argue those, those thoughts about when are you saved and all of that kind of stuff about free will, it's kind of circular.
It is.
You kind of chase your tail.
Yeah, and you get into just a bunch of BS that you're not going to ever be able to answer.
Yes.
And so what I finally landed on was that he is the one that's doing the saving. That's not my job. And so the other thing that helped me with is that if there's somebody that I know that is a believer and they stumble, I'm okay with that, because I don't believe that stumble causes them to lose their salvation.
Absolutely.
You're a child of God.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's, for me, the problem is unbelief, not sin.
Man, when we were young, we got saved and unsaved about 200 or 300 times a week.
Well, that's like I said.
Based on that,
if you farted in the wind the wrong way, you had to go to the altar that night.
I was raised so conservative. You said fart, you just got unsaved.
Yeah. You're like get your ass to the altar, boy.
See, I've had a lot of cringe factors right during this podcast right now from my history.
Yeah.
Paul feels unsaved right now.
Yeah,
I do. Let's go have a prayer meeting. Yeah.
Well, Cliff, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for leading the way you lead and sharing your heart with us on this episode. And, man, some exciting things to come. Can't wait to see what's next.
Yeah. Dude,
this is a wrap, boys.
You're a fierce friend. I love you.
Thank you, brother. Love you guys. Thanks for doing this with me. It means a lot.
Man, we're happy to be here. Even Brother Farnsworth is quite anointed at the thought of it. He's excited. Well, boys, another episode is in the can.
In the can.
In the can.
Let's end with what kind of bourbon does Brother Farnsworth like? I think he likes Pappy.
He doesn't touch that stuff.
No, I think he likes Pappy.
He likes Pappy Van Winkle, but he wouldn't tell anybody that he likes it because he'd lose his license. Hallelujah. Glory. Can't let anybody know. Hallelujah.
That's a wrap on Misfits.
That's a wrap of Misfits Social. This is Brother Farnsworth. God bless you.
Go.